Hi, Phil. You are a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and you work for 37 years in the British government's National Health Service. So you also chaired the International Association of Energy Psychology during 2 years.
Yes.
And so my first question is, how did you move from psychoanalysis to energy psychotherapy?
Okay, yes, that's a very good question. So because I had a background initially as a clinical psychologist, which was quite a broad basis for considering mental health problems from a range of psychological perspectives. And then I trained as a psychoanalyst, but having that broader background base gave me a little more flexibility than if I had just trained in psychoanalysis. So what I found quite a long time ago, I would say it was back in the mid-1980s, I was very well trained as a clinical psychologist, and also at that point as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I trained in psychoanalytic therapy at the Tavistock Clinic. I had not yet gone on to train fully as a psychoanalyst, but I'd done a lot of very good training in talking therapies. And I was working in a psychiatric setting in Britain, in Hertfordshire. And I was asked to see quite a lot of very troubled patients, very troubled clients. And I found that many of them, perhaps almost all of them, had suffered significant levels of trauma, often extensive childhood trauma. And I found, to my dismay, that talking was literally worse than useless. So people would talk to me, they would seem to find it quite easy to open up and talk to me about very terrible experiences they'd had, because I can be quite facilitative, I'm quite empathic, easy to talk to. People would tell me things and we would understand them together, but they would not feel better. They would feel worse, often much worse, and they'd leave a session and go off and self-harm. Or we'd work for a long time, months, years, and people were not getting better. In fact, they were getting worse. And that made me realize very clearly that there are some limitations in talk therapy. And so that set me on a search for better ways of helping people, which has continued. So it's not surprising really that I found my way to energy psychology methods, because they are, I believe, on the basis of evidence, the best, the most effective methods for psychological therapy that we have discovered so far.
And what aroused your interest in energy psychology, whereas you were already trained in EMDR?
Okay, so a major hurdle for me with my background in psychoanalysis was to embrace EMDR, because first of all, it's a method that strikes many people as just very, very strange, particularly when it was first developed. And it has a bodily focus, a somatic focus. It involves attention to body sensations, and it involves doing things with the body, and it involves the senses, whether it's eye movements, auditory or tactile, whatever. So making that shift from purely listening and talking to doing something of a more somatic and sensory nature with clients, that was the major step. And then from there, amongst EMDR colleagues, I began to hear about acupoint tapping methods, particularly EFT, which could map very easily onto an EMDR protocol. And so I began to explore EFT and found it to be even more effective than EMDR and much more gentle and much safer. And so, well, I'd experienced this very effective method. So there was no going back really. And my clients, my patients were getting better much more quickly, much more easily. The work was less tiring for me, less stressful, and it had a lighter quality. It was, instead of feeling stressed and weighed down, clients would leave the session feeling lighter, and I would feel lighter too.
You introduced EFT in some hospitals in England and trained psychiatrists and psychologists in this method. How well did this go?
Well, yes, I began to teach EFT within the health organization that I worked for. And there was a great deal of interest in it, actually. And I ran several workshops, which were very, very well attended. And so a lot of people in the organization I worked for began to embrace EFT type of methods with very good results. The problem was that one or two psychiatrists, not people I actually knew personally or who had ever met me, but heard of this and were concerned that this was not a very orthodox sounding method, and it wasn't in the British NICE guidelines, that is the organization that oversees what treatment should be provided within the British National Health Service. And so I was asked to justify this strange method and describe the research basis for it. And there wasn't a huge amount of research available at that time. There was some, and I presented it as best I could. And it met with a very mixed response. So some people on the panel I presented to were extremely hostile and determined to ban this method from the organization. Others were rather more open-minded. Unfortunately, the chair of the panel was a very fair-minded man who wanted the best for the patients, and it was agreed that we could, those of us who had trained in the method, could discreetly continue our work whilst embedding it in broader frameworks, which is what we were doing anyway. And so we continued discreetly, but yeah, I won't expand on the story at this point.
Okay, as you know, we have a lot of psychoanalysts in France. Was this well received by your psychoanalyst peers in UK?
Well, this is the kind of practitioner that I've been talking to over the years. This has been my group, really, my audience. So I've been building bridges from the seemingly strange methods of energy psychology and making bridges to the more conventional approaches of psychoanalysis, psychotherapy. And I would say that there has been quite a lot of interest, not so much amongst those who are invested in very conventional psychoanalytic positions or who are very invested in their status and position within an organization. But those who have a more open perspective, many have been very interested. But of those, it's only a relative few who have been able really to take that big leap of exploring it further and persisting with it until they start to get very, very good results. But that does mean that there have been quite a number, a minority, but still a significant minority of psychotherapists in Britain with a psychoanalytic background who have begun to embrace this method and who would call themselves energy psychotherapists. And I don't know how it's developed in France, but the way it's developed in Britain has been a little different from, say, the United States. So in Britain, there are many people who come from all kinds of backgrounds and train as psychotherapists of one kind or another, who are not psychologists. They just do a psychotherapy training. And so it's been that group that I've been addressing. And so we do now have a significant body of people who are energy psychotherapists with quite a strong psychoanalytic, quite a strong psychoanalytic emphasis.
Okay, and you develop your own method, which is called PEP. How did you develop that? What was the idea, how you came to that?
Okay, so because my background is as a psychoanalyst, it was inevitable that when I began to learn EFT and other energy psychology methods, I would start to use them in a more psychoanalytic way, or I would start to integrate them. So one of the realizations that was very important to me came from thought field therapy and Dr. Callahan's discovery that any state of distress, whether it's a mental distress or physical distress, has an informational coding in the body's subtle energy system that is expressed as a sequence of meridian tapping points. So it's somewhat like a code. Dr. Callahan's metaphor was of a combination lock. You press the right keys and the door opens. And that was a rather laborious way of muscle testing for that sequence. So I found this very, very exciting, the idea that anything that is troubling us is expressed as information in the energy field, and that we can locate the code for it through a simple muscle testing procedure, and then we can clear it and the distress collapses. I found that an astonishing idea. So then what I found was possible is that the muscle testing, the discerning the diagnostic meridian sequence can become quite easy and fast with practice. The practitioner can learn to read the client's energy field and discern the relevant meridians that need addressing at any particular moment. And so it's possible to be guiding the client to tap on a particular point. So I might say just tap on this point here and speak of whatever comes to mind. And so it becomes very much a process of exploration. It's allowing the meridians to speak, and it becomes a very flowing, free associative process. And it very rapidly leads to the most crucial psychodynamic issues, themes and conflicts. And usually it leads very quickly to core childhood experiences. And the content of what emerges remains very familiar psychoanalytic material. Childhood traumas, conflicts, the way the person has tried to deal with those. The content is very, very familiar. It's just the method, the procedure that is a little different. So the process becomes very, very flowing, very free associative, and in that way too, it's very psychoanalytic. The difference, or one difference between that and a conventional psychoanalytic approach is not only that it's much faster, but also it does not require me as the practitioner to contribute very much in terms of ideas or interpretations, because it's all emerging from the client. I don't need to do much other than say, tap here or tap here and speak of whatever comes to mind.
Can you explain what is muscle testing and what are the benefits for people who are working in the field of psychotherapy?
Did I hear you correctly, Jean-Michel, that you're asking about the muscle testing?
Yes, because a lot of people doesn't know what is it exactly, and it's look very strange for a lot of psychologists to start to test with the arm and say, what are we doing?
Yes, yeah. Okay, so although it's commonly called muscle testing, it's really not testing the muscle. It's just getting muscle tone biofeedback would be another, perhaps more accurate way of expressing it. So what we find is that if someone holds an arm outstretched and the practitioner presses lightly on the wrist, whilst that client thinks or speaks a certain thing, then there will be slight variations in the muscle tone, and a locking strong muscle tone will indicate that the person's system, for example, believes the statement, the form of words to be correct. If it's spongy, the person's system considers it incorrect. So we can use it to test hypotheses about what's going on. So we don't need to make speculative, we don't need to rely on speculation. If we have a hypothesis about what is really troubling the person, we can quickly test it and discard it if it's not correct. And frequently my speculations turn out to be incorrect, so that's good. We can put them aside with the muscle testing. So another purpose of another use of the muscle testing, the muscle tone testing, is we can use it to detect whether there is remaining distress in the person's system. So if we've been working on a particular trauma, we can, and it seems to be finished, we can go back to muscle testing it, have the person think about the trauma, and see whether there is any sponginess left in the muscle tone, or whether it stays locked strong. And I try to be very thorough, so I'm not satisfied unless that muscle tone remains very firmly strong. And it's quite a sensitive thing. People observing me muscle testing sometimes said it's like you're listening with your fingertips. And that's actually how I think that's what I'm doing. And if there's any sponginess left there, I want us to go back to the trauma and clear the rest of it until that arm remains really firm when the person thinks of the trauma. And the third particular use of the muscle testing is to find the meridian sequence. And this initially can seem a little bit complex, a little bit difficult. Dr. Callahan's original method was to have the person think of the trauma, for example, the arm goes spongy, and have the client then place their other hand on various of the meridian test points or alarm points. And when the client puts their finger on the most relevant alarm point, the arm will lock strong. And that point is then tapped on, and then you find the next one in the same way. So it's quite slow and laborious, but fortunately it's possible to develop much more, much quicker ways of doing that. And it becomes possible for the practitioner, with practice, to learn to self-muscle test very, very quickly, scanning the client's field, and then it becomes really as fast as you like. It's tap here, now tap here, and the other astonishing thing that is revealed through using muscle testing is that it really doesn't matter whether the thought that's being tested is in the client's mind or the practitioner's mind. So I can be testing someone's arm, and if I think a false statement, their arm will go spongy. If I think a true statement, it will lock strong. And this is absolutely consistent. And so much so that it's often more reliable than having the client say the words aloud. So it just illustrates how we become one communicative field when we're working with a client. It becomes an energy field that embraces the two people.
You are going to teach psychoanalytic energy psychotherapy for the second time in France. To whom is it addressed?
Okay, well, I think it would be of interest to a wide range of people. So one group of people would be any of those who already have any knowledge or experience of EFT or other energy psychology methods. And it would also be of interest, I think, to any psychotherapists or people with a psychoanalytic background who were intrigued and interested in the possibilities of energy psychology and how they might incorporate it into their work. So I think it could be of interest and relevance to a very wide group of people. Anyone really who is a clinical practitioner who works with clients, with patients, with emotional problems, who has a genuine interest and an openness to exploring these fields.
Which are the three core components of PEP?
So I think one key component is the principle that any state of distress, any state of pain, whether it's physical or emotional, and any state of conflict is expressed as information in the energy systems of the body. And it's possible to detect that information. And incidentally, by working with energetic information, using muscle testing and so forth, it's possible, not necessarily desirable, but it is possible in principle to work with someone's mental state without having them speak at all about what is troubling them. And I sometimes do that in workshops as a demonstration, just to demonstrate the process, that we're working with energetic information, which also correlates with emotional information, but we're just getting the energetic information. So we're working with energetic information alongside the emotional and psychological information. So yes, so that in that way we can allow the meridians to speak. Another important point is to address the internal objections to resolving a problem, which Dr. Callahan called psychological reversals. And there almost always are psychological reversals or internal objections. Otherwise, the person probably would not have been left with persisting problems. And so, so we can detect these quite easily, particularly through muscle testing. And they usually fall into the categories of either it's not safe to resolve the problem, or I do not deserve to resolve the problem, or I will not be me. It violates my identity. Sometimes it's I'm too angry to resolve the problem. So we can address these. And often it's useful to follow the roots and origins of those objections. Often that becomes the most important part of the work. Why is it not safe to resolve the problem? And I take the person tapping through the sequence and speak of whatever comes to mind. And we almost always get to very crucial issues by tracking the reversals to their childhood origins. So I don't know whether how many points that is, but that's what I see as I think the core of psychoanalytic energy psychotherapy.
Okay, Phil, you are also developing Blue Diamond Healing right now, and you will introduce this method in your PEP workshop in Paris in June this year. Yes. Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Blue Diamond Healing. Okay, so for a long time I wanted to try to find ways of clearing problems from a person's system at an even deeper, more complete energetic level. And so Blue Diamond Healing evolved for me over a number of years, and it has some quite esoteric origins that I won't go into here. But basically, there's an energy point under the collarbones in the center, which I call the Blue Diamond. And we can think of it as an access point to higher dimensions. And we can enter into that Blue Diamond field and activate its spinning Merkaba fields, a clockwise spinning top field and a counterclockwise spinning lower field. And the counterclockwise spinning lower field takes out all that is waste, all that is false, all that is toxic, whilst the clockwise field from above brings in fresh energy and information. So what I tend to do is, after working with what I've described of the psychoanalytic energy psychotherapy approach, which incidentally involves a lot of conventional listening and talking that would occur in any ordinary psychotherapy. But after doing all of that work, when much of the work seems to be done, then towards the end, I will invite the client into that blue diamond healing field to clear it more fully. And often people describe it as quite a remarkable experience. I also use the blue diamond field, when we are stuck, when neither the client nor I has any idea where to go next, or what a problem is about, or how to resolve it. And I invite the client into the blue diamond field. It's 2 fingers on this blue diamond point, and then the other hand on the heart chakra. And I say to the client, just go into the blue diamond field and inquire within what you need to know or understand at this point. And I do the same for a few seconds, and then almost always one of us will have some relevant idea about what the issue is or where we need to go.
Okay, and last question, what is your message towards the French practitioner who could be interested in your workshop in Paris?
Oh, well, I'd love you to come to my workshop, and I'd love to share with you these astonishing phenomena, and for us to explore together and see what happens, because each workshop is its own life field, and each workshop I do is different. It's unique according to the energy of the group, the people within it. We always discover something new. It's always new learning for me. I never teach in a very structured or ordered way. I always allow it to flow organically. We always get all the relevant material covered, but it follows its own path. So it's always rather exciting and awesome in the true sense of inspiring awe.